But it is a threat to world order, as we know.
Following the Beatles' 1970 breakup, the media sensationalized the growing hostility between the band by drawing sweeping conclusions. Nevertheless, the recording sessions for the last three albums, The Beatles, Abbey Road, and Let It Be, were marred by power disputes. During tense occasions, Ringo Starr and George Harrison even left the band. Paul McCartney took on a de facto managing position after the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein passed very suddenly and tragically in August 1967. Harrison, who found it difficult to fit his compositions onto records, was greatly displeased that McCartney was the main creative power behind the last two albums, as evidenced in Peter Jackson's well-received 2021 documentary, The Beatles, Get Back. During the Abbey Road sessions, McCartney's dominance was especially evident when he made his bandmates endure a laborious recording procedure for Maxwell's Silver Hammer. With the exception of a Moog overdub that was done later, the song was finished in 3 sessions in July 1969. The backing track was recorded 16 times on the first day alone, and then 21 times on the third. On occasion, Paul would force us to perform these extremely fruity songs, Harrison recalled in the 1970s to Crawdaddy. Maxwell's Silver Hammer was so fruity, my God. While both Ringo Starr and John Lennon expressed dissatisfaction with the song, they were generally happy with Abbey Road, considering it to be one of the band's better albums. Harrison could have preferred Abbey Road if not for Maxwell's Silver Hammer, but Rubber Soul, the revolutionary album from 1966, edged ahead. Harrison said in the 1990s, "My favorite album was Rubber Soul. I believe that was the best one we made, even at that moment. The most significant aspect of it was that sounds that we had previously been unable to hear were now audible to us. In addition, everything was growing at the time, including us, and we were becoming more and more impacted by the music of others." Harrison was extremely pleased with the Beatles' subsequent foray into psychedelic music with Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, even though he had some concerns about certain tracks from the latter album. In a 1977 interview published by George Harrison on George Harrison Interviews and Encounters, Harrison stated, "I liked when we got into Rubber Soul, Revolver. Each album had something good about it and progressed." The guitarist did, however, go on to mention a few albums he wasn't all that fond of. Harrison went on, "There were albums that weren't good in my opinion, like Yellow Submarine. We combined all of the tracks to create an album. I'm speaking of the English records here because we discovered later in the States that they had produced 3 albums. For every 2 we had, as we used to put, 14 tracks on albums, and also had singles that weren't on albums back then. The singles would be placed, certain tracks would be removed, and the running order would be altered, and then completely new packages such as Yesterday and Today would be created." Harrison also talked about issues with the band's previous records' audio quality later in the chat. He said, "Those old records weren't really stereo. The records were rechanneled and had a mono sound. Because the backing is just on one side, some of the stereo is awful. To be exact, we recorded the first 2 albums directly onto a 2-track machine, at least the first album,